Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Fintech Combine. I am your host, Kris Kovacs, and this is the series where we talk with and sometimes about community-based institutions, the business and digital transformation projects, and the innovators, entrepreneurs, and fintechs that make it all possible. On this episode, we're speaking with Kyle Stutzman, the CEO and co-founder of Janusea, about their middleware solution and how credit unions can employ middleware strategy to be more agile and connect with their members. So if you're ready, let's suit up and get out on the field. Kyle, welcome to the Fintech Combine. I'm super excited to have you here. Why don't you start off by telling our listeners a little bit about your background and about Janusea?
Yeah, I mean, let's start when I was 5, or when do you want me to start with this process? No, professional career. Actually, insurance and investments is where I started my professional career, which is something a lot of people don't know. So I was a Prudential rep. I was, Series 6 and 63 license for investments, and all my property and casualty and health and all those licenses. It was an interesting world back then, but I quickly knew that was not for me because the company owned you when it was right. You didn't own your book, which oddly, fast forward all the way today, when you think about credit unions in our industry. When you're a community institution and you serve those you serve, and how that connection is so important. There was some overlap in the sense that you were, a rep in a community, but not in the same way as far as the culture. So I go all the way back to, it was insurance and investments. It was in credit unions. I got drug into a credit union by a CEO who said the credit union needed help. And sometimes I love telling that story because my money was at this credit union, and here the CEO is coming to me saying, "Hey, I know you have some technology talents. I need you to come in and help with some things." And I'm like, "Wait a minute, like my money's there. Like, are you sure you should be disclosing this to me, that there's some help that's needed at your financial institution?" But that was my kickoff to getting into the industry, was being drug in as a unpaid consultant to help out a CEO who wanted some things looked at and some advice from outside the industry with what was going on inside his credit union. And from there,
Okay.
Go ahead.
There has to be something in between, right? Because one does not typically go grab an insurance agent off the street and say, "You must know something about technology. Come help me." Right? Was there something in between, or were you just part of the AV club in elementary school like all of us?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's one of the things. When you're in tech, you either like gravitate to it and it's a passion and it just makes sense in your brain, or you work at learning it. And for me, it's always been it just made sense in my brain. So it's the story just gets more odd. I was actually at a church doing youth and young adult ministry when I got pulled in the credit union space. But surprise, surprise, that doesn't pay a lot to do, nonprofit kids work. So I was doing tech services on the side, and I'd been doing that all through college. I helped write a online bookstore for a small publisher, got them connected to all the affiliate components. I was building and selling computers and servers. All of that was what I did to support myself through college, while I didn't take many, college courses that were tech related, right? I mean, it was all over the board, but I was in tech every day. And so that grew and grew and grew until eventually I started going down this path, and then it became tech and business. So I really got intrigued with the actual credit union business and purpose and everything, balance sheets, and understanding the, shocking balance sheets, and understanding how the environment and the economy impacted us. So, there's a many steps. I wish I could tell you it was this master 5 to 10 year plan. That's not the way the world works for me. Yeah,
it isn't for me either. And I tell people all the time, it doesn't work that way, right? It's more like that song, "The River" by Garth Brooks, right? Just follow it and stay between the banks, right? And you'll figure out what happens. So
Agreed.
how did you parlay this work that you did for the credit union ultimately to come and co-found Janusea?
Yeah, there's a couple more steps in there, but the short version is I got intrigued with helping larger parts of the industry It was after 9/11. There was some business continuity, disaster recovery opportunities that were flowing up in QSOs. I know one that was growing fast, and I went to be their COO and clean up kind of internal operations, standardize it, do processes. Through that, I got exposed fully to the QSO and vendor world, and did some individual consulting. And then once again, the river analogy is great, because a couple guys south of Boston, Mass, who had nothing to do with the credit union industry, and I kept bugging them. I was a consultant at the time, so they used me for services in the enterprise world down in the DC Mid-Atlantic area, and I used their enterprise resources, which were extremely talented, for things that needed to be done in the credit union space that we didn't have resources for. And at that time, someone pitched to them a QSO idea, which they thought was crazy. Why are you going to go after this very vertical, small industry? They were all enterprise guys. But they told Jack Smith, who is the co-founder with me, and a few others at Pure IT, I know someone just as crazy as you. Why don't you go talk to Kyle? And that was the start of then a 7-year journey of building Pure IT. And out of Pure IT, that's where the Janusea connection happens. All the way back to when I first started with credit unions, I realized how systems were not connected and integrated well. And I banged my head against the wall for 7 some years in an institution. I paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to course to get integrations written, to do special projects that shouldn't have cost that much and shouldn't have taken 9+ months to do. So I already had this bug and passion for fixing that. And then I spent 7 years, we're talking strategies and roadmaps, and every single one of them was hindered by the fact that people couldn't connect and work together. So I became CEO of Janusea out of a passion to solve a problem, not because of any sort of, once again, master plan. It was, hey, here's an opportunity, here's a way we can tackle it. Are any other people crazy enough to go along on this journey with me? And we found some credit unions and some co-founders that were, and it's been an exciting ride.
Talk to me a little bit about the technologies you employ to help credit unions connect better, right? So there's a lot of talk right now in the industry about middleware, right?
Yeah.
And tell me a little bit about your solution and how it helps credit unions be more agile.
Yeah, I definitely will, but this is a good opportunity. You know this world like I do. So what if we say broader? What is out there? Are you familiar with what are the larger middleware solutions that you would say people toy with in our industry? You want to take a shot at a couple? I'll add to it. I mean, they're going to be competitors or quasi competitors, and we all handle things differently. But yeah, what have you seen out there?
My experience at the credit union that I was at, we brought in MuleSoft, right? So we brought in the MuleSoft platform, which was exceptionally powerful, right? Then there's ones, I don't even know if they're still around, Mashery, Layer 7. Like there's a variety of other providers that we looked at the credit union. And the challenge for us became, in some cases, around, it was a wonderful platform, but we had to have the time and materials and people to train in order to use those platforms to ultimately meet the results. And that was kind of where the challenge we kept running into was we had this thing over there, and in reality, in some cases, we put it between things just to make sure we were using it, right?
right. Yeah, I've seen that strategy. Yeah, and most credit unions using something big like an enterprise MuleSoft have to have a whole resource team that's external, like consultants that will help. You may be able to define the business case, do the BA work, but when it comes down to some of those final integrations, unless you've really invested in the resources and training to do it internally, they tend to have an extra party, which just increases the cost and complexity of doing it. I mean, I would expand maybe even broader. What is it that digital banking platforms are doing today? I'm stepping into your world, right?
Well, I mean, we can always talk about how we use Janusea. Is that what you mean?
Well, that plus just in general, there's an integration point with some digital platforms in general across the board that say, here we have. Now, they don't have the flexibility of a traditional digital platforms don't have the flexibility of a middleware. It's more of, hey, we have these connectors and we allow people to connect with this small subset of APIs. Right. I just don't want to ignore that for maybe someone listening for a larger conversation that they're there are many ways people try to solve the problem, which for me is more important than necessarily the specific tool. But yeah, we do have a connection because, from our standpoint, we're using a serverless or a cloud-based Kubernetes and other cloud-based technologies that allow us to basically provide a middleware solution to the industry with a canonical model. So basically for us, it's speak a language. You want to use Babel or you want to use Rosetta Stone, right? And we'll take a language that you speak to us and we'll translate it to the various ones of the industry, various cores, conversations. And that's very powerful in our perspective because it allows anyone to work together and it allows us to standardize those calls. I want to talk more about the standards later, but if I can take a step back, I want to share an analogy of middleware that I think is helpful. And you can react to it and tell me I'm crazy, or we can cut it out if it's not. We have opportunities like we go shopping every now and then, not an exciting thing in my life, but the middleware solutions in our world, similar to clothing, would be originally you had no tool sets, right? So you have to grow your own cotton, shave your sheep, make your own clothing, right? You have to start from complete scratch. That's the way our industry was. Now we also have the opportunity where you can go to a store and you can buy some pre-done fabric. And this is where I start to think about the tool sets out there, the MuleSofts and other related tool sets. So now you get some help, right? You get some templates. Maybe you can even buy a pattern that gets you partway there, but you still got in the end, make your own clothes. And you're responsible for making those clothes. And then you start to move into solutions like Janusea, where, hey, we're going to actually make something that fits you. And yes, it is mass produced in the sense, but it's mass produced for a specific industry. So we know that we can fit that need and fit the styles that are happening right now. So sometimes when people say, I don't understand the difference between all the middleware solutions or how it would connect things out there, I try to say, well, you have to figure out how much work and ownership you want in the creation and the design and the ongoing, methodology around that versus having a partner that delivers it and is delivering a specific value. And that's where I think Janusea fits in. We're working towards the specific value. So we're handing you the package as opposed to starting from just scratch where you're going to have to do it yourself or even just have a pattern that doesn't actually, get to that final result.
Yeah, I would build on your analogy, and I talk a little bit about how a good partner for most credit unions. Well, yeah, some credit unions are going to say, "Hey, I've got the time and the talent and the resources. I'm going to dedicate to building an interface or a middleware team that manages the connections, that manages the translations, that does all of those things." Right? That's the shear the sheep model, I guess you might say.
Right.
Alternatively, because of just the sheer amount of work that credit unions and especially credit union IT teams have to do, right? What they need is a tailor, right?
Yeah.
Somebody who is used to making those patterns, used to using the patterns, can still make something unique for you, right?
Yeah.
That fits your needs exactly, but doesn't require you to do the field work and have the teams out there and resources dedicated just to doing those things, right? That's the real value. It's bespoke to a certain degree because it is intended to be for the specific use of the institution. And a credit union can choose, right, where do I want to play on that path, right? Where is my strategic difference going to be? I would argue most of them are probably in the, hey, I need some help from a tailor side of it, and not, I'm going to dedicate this whole team to do it. Unfortunately, I think some credit unions dive into, I'm going to go ahead and buy the thing and do this and all this stuff. And I think in a lot of cases, it doesn't pan out. Those projects don't pan out well.
It's a challenge, or even if they do pan out, they find that a year later, they either lost that staff person or it was done by a consultant. And now it needs some tweaks. It needs some changes, and they don't know the next step. They don't know how to do it, or worse. We've talked to a number of large institutions that did go down that path, and they have some really talented people, but they did it based on the current framework of where they were at the moment. And so they've done integrations, and now they're looking at new core systems or new data platforms or new other systems, and they look at their integrations and they're like, I'm going to have to rewrite these all from scratch. I didn't do it from a methodology that allows me to take either the front end away or the back end away and not have to redo everything in the middle. There's, our approach at Janusea is we have two sides where we standardize. We standardize the calls at the endpoint that you're talking to, but we also standardize the calls at the front end. So there's some consistency, which in a way abstracts both sides. If you are in the tech world and you go back to how did virtual servers and cloud disrupt the industry so much? Well, if you think about middleware, that's getting to the best way to do some middleware is actually abstract those endpoints. So you have the flexibility to swap things in and out as quickly and as easily as you can. And that's where I think you have power. How you use the middlewares is much more powerful than just the tool itself.
And that was the promise that a lot of the credit union executives were sold on when they bought the middleware, right? It was supposed to it's supposed to help make these changes easier to do. But to your point, if it results in a direct connection, right, between them, you actually haven't made it any better, right? That's an interesting. And your point about how you're sometimes dependent on a particular resource, either the person who has the vision for the middleware and how it's going to be used, perhaps they leave or are promoted or something else, and then the partner, right? Like if you lose the person who has the vision for how all this is going to work, it's hard to share that vision with others, right? And I think that's where I have certainly seen things get difficult in some cases. So how does working with someone like Janusea help address that need for tailored support and for a trusted partner that can help the credit union build a strategy around their middleware?
Yeah, it's a good question. We bring a methodology to the table, and that's both an advantage and potentially a disadvantage. If you don't like our methodology, then that's going to be a challenge because we bring it for a specific value purpose, and we bring it really to lower the perceived value around the integration point and raise the value around what you're trying to accomplish is kind of part of our methodology, which is why we say we're working to standardize one end and the front end and the back end so that we have the ability to do it. And that we explain to people in the fintech world, the software providers. So if you're a credit union working with software providers, sometimes that's an initial rub with them because they say, well, my advantage is that I can connect to these and then I can sell to all of these credit unions. And we quickly start flipping the tables on them and saying, well, everyone who's working with Janusea actually has access to all of these cores out of the gate. So your value isn't the fact that you can work with someone. That should just be how our industry works. And that's what we're changing. Your value is that way, the way you do it and all of your business logic and all of your business value that you provide. And the integrations should really just be table stakes that everybody gets and everyone can work together. So if someone really has pushed hard against us, which has happened, we've responded and said, well, you don't have to work with Janusea, but if your competitors start working with us, they may have that competitive advantage of being able to be, they're up and running most of the time in 30 to 45 days, talking to real live institutions. And opposed to that, you talking serious work where people are spending months, if not 9 months, if not 18 months to try to get a few integrations up and navigate all of the core programs and partnerships and all those challenges. On the credit union side, it's someone that actually understands their business, right? We have people that have worked for and with cores. We've also worked in the integration standpoint for many, many years. And so we can come alongside and understand what's trying to be accomplished and guide. And we're really working our new path, we've realized, is not just integration value, but also for credit unions, the speed to value. So how do we gather data directly? Right now, we're going through things with a few POCs that we actually gather the data out of the core that is needed for the integration, as opposed to having credit unions go gather it, sometimes get the wrong information, sometimes spend weeks getting the information together. Why is that even necessary when we can just pull the data ourselves, hand it back to them and say, do you want to sign off on this or make any changes? Obviously, there's things like what GL do you go to or other things that they definitely have to give input on, but it's so much easier to just see it on a list and then make a change as opposed to have to go from scratch. So I think that's where our value comes in. We're focused on that, and we're thinking of things that they may not have on their radar. You may change cores sometime in the future. Well, we're designing the integrations so that if you change cores, that can be a swap on our side, and it's not going to be some lift on your side to do a whole bunch of integrations. We're doing the integrations, and I hate to say this, but you may not use the same digital banking platform, the same new account opening solution for the next 15 years. If you need to swap that out, that's a much easier swap with people that are already integrated or with a new integration because of the middleware, as opposed to worrying about what works with this core now, what might work with my future core, what might work with these other systems. So that's kind of some of the methodology we bring in, and it's really powerful once people start to understand it. Sometimes, though, all they need is just give me some value now. I'm just frustrated. I can't get this solution up and working. And it seems I only have two choices. I can only choose this one vendor because it's the only one that I can find that works with my core. Just giving them power of choice is really powerful.
Do most conversations with Janusea start on the fintech side or the credit union side?
That's right now. In our first years, they are starting more on the initial fintech side. Now, it's always a joint conversation, though. So when we'll have institutions come to us and say, I want to work with X, and they'll introduce us to the fintech. What we find is that we don't have a large sales team, just to put it plainly, that's going and able to push to individual credit unions. So we often get exposed to credit unions either through conferences and other events, and then they ask the question and we start those relationships, or they'll do a connection with one of our fintech partners and immediately a light bulb goes off and they're like, I didn't know I had this opportunity before. That's happened multiple times over the last 3 months, which is wonderful. Hey, we've had this dream of doing something with our SEG that we've never been able to do before because we didn't think the integration was possible. Could we do this? And it's a wonderful conversation to see people start to dream that way again, instead of just assuming that they can't do those things. So now we're getting direct relationships, and now then those relationships spawn additional conversations. We had Great Lakes Credit Union, who works with us. They're an enterprise customer. They brought Blackline software to us. And in that situation, a complete flip and reversal. Blackline actually said, we're a big provider. We have an API. We don't even want to integrate directly with the platform. But Blackline wanted to have this work with their core. The core wants, Great Lakes wants. So we actually wrote true middleware. We wrote the translation between their API and the API that was needed for their core. And because we do it in our way, now anyone that wants to use Blackline and they're part of Janusea can use it because we've already written that middle component. I'm sure there'll be some tweaks and other slight adjustments, but we're working off a 90% done situation, not we're starting from scratch. So that's the benefit as institutions share and work together. We are able to reuse some of that work in order to help others in the industry and help others who want to work with solutions, whether they're officially part of the platform or just an institution said, I need to have this connection.
And if a credit union uses Janusea to connect to one of those fintechs, then they have the ability to access other fintechs who are also using Janusea as well, right? So it is a compounding effect on their innovations and what they can actually deliver.
Yeah. And this, I think, in your world, well with some of your FinTech Connect and other solutions. But yeah, it's that concept. It's a platform that's not. It's not a curated platform where Janusea is choosing the winners or losers or who gets to play at the table. It is a industry platform that people have open access to work with us on it. And if they're part of the platform, they've committed to these standards. And so, yes, there's already a set list of people. We have, I think we have one live new account opening and two more that are in process. So all of a sudden, it's a good example of what it's like to have, multiple solutions. They're all competitors, but they're all working for the same goal. How do we help institutions? And they even have different perspectives. Some start from a lending first perspective. Some start from a new account first perspective. Right. Even others are more about ongoing engagement, but they know to actually further engagement, they also want to bring the relationship in to begin with. So it's really exciting to see what's out there and how they're working and competing with each other. On our side, we want to promote all of them to say, hey, you have options to work with them and they're readily available. It's something that is attractive, obviously, to the institutions.
If I'm a customer of Janusea, how do I learn about the integrations that you have with other fintechs and providers?
So that's we have set meetings to go over with our enterprise customers about what's out there, just to give them updates. So some of our account management, I'd say it's an area that we can improve on. Right now, we do a lot of announcements, with our press releases, and we started to put places on our website. So what we're designing now is, instead of just banners of here's who the partners are, putting that full list that's available to them to know that we can move through those. But I would say it's a weakness for us, and I don't mind admitting that at this point. We're growing so fast that we have this list that continues to grow and compile, and so it's one of those areas we have other people that do promote us, and that's helpful. That we can go through it, but we don't currently have that quarterly call that gives an update. And there's a lot of those things in the works for our PR and marketing side of how are we going to make sure that this is known. How do you guys share with your customers? This is a good place for me to learn.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the hardest aspects of this, right? Because just like you're saying, in our world, and let me set the record straight for folks. I get a lot of times I get the question, they say, what's the difference between Constellation and Janusea, right?
Yes.
Well, first of all, Janusea is a partner of ours. We use Janusea, right? Which is why we love Kyle and we love the team there. Kyle's team focuses on data integration to the core on the back end. We focus on user experience integration on the front end, right? And that's what the FinTech Connect product that Kyle mentioned is.
Absolutely.
So, and part of what that tool, what that capability allows us to do in our platform, is to bring the user experience from all these fintechs into one deliverable for the credit union customer. But that changes all the time, right? So we're constantly getting new services. In fact, last year, credit union members accessed 97 unique services not written by us, right? So the pace of just trying to keep up and maintain that, as soon as you produce a partnership guide, a directory, anything else, it's immediately dated because you just certified some. We had 250 certification events last year, right? So, I mean, we're constantly seeing new features and services come out. And so it really is one of the more difficult parts of it. I was hoping to learn from you guys as well. Maybe we can figure out, like, maybe there's a QSO in here that's just about selling services to each other's clients. I don't know, right? But there's something there that which is great, and I think that's healthy for both networks, right? Healthy for the data connectivity network, healthy for the UI user experience network. Is that it's happening so quickly and changing so fast? It's just hard to keep up. Right.
Well, I think it's going to go beyond. Our user bases share information, and it's much more powerful when they're able to share it. So that's really where we're trying to figure out. So we don't just need the list on our website. We also need that way for individuals to share. I just spent 4 hours with an institution, and they were talking about how their acquisition and merger strategy, which would include some potential bank acquisitions, but definitely some smaller credit unions that they were working to integrate, how Middleware plays a key role in that, instead of the traditional concept of how do we just hard set conversion and force all members from one institution to come to a new one. What's it like if the servicing front end could actually service members, whether they were still on the old core that was acquired or the new core, and a migration button would allow them to move at the most convenient, natural time. They choose to move over because they see the new digital solutions, they see the new products they can, or they request something new. And at that point, they obviously move to the new core, and the system effectively closes and drains the account here and opens the account and funds it from a GL on that side. So they're talking some really cool, innovative things. As they move ahead, of course, we're going to promote and share that, but that people sharing their ideas of how they're doing innovative things with middleware and with fintech connections and software connections, that's more powerful than anything I can write. And so we're trying to figure out how to get those stories out there too.
One of the most effective things we've done is we have, we've taken opportunities at conferences, and we do it with our clients all the time. We do like demo days, right? Where we just have our partners come in and demo and show off their services, right?
Right.
They're using the technology, and their success will ultimately bring us additional success, right?
Absolutely.
So it's hard for us sometimes, I would imagine in your case as well, just to put it all together, because you got all these different services that do these different things. And instead, get with your partners in these ecosystems, right? Get with your partners and share the stage, share the limelight, and let them get in and talk about what they're doing and how they can help the institution. I think that's probably been our most successful. We've even bought at conferences. We'll buy time on stage and just bring our partners up, right, and let them talk about it, right? Because that's really where the magic happens.
No, I completely agree. We sell our partners all the time because it's the solutions they're providing. Once again, is the value. It's not the integration component, but we are a key part of enabling that, a key part of how it's enabled, and the speed to make that happen for both sides. So it is the power of those solutions that are good. And then for us, it's the challenge of how do we promote everyone as broadly, and different partners are engaged at different levels, and so we do our best to make sure that everyone knows we're always neutral. And this is a hard one. So instead of thinking of sales, we want to think of education and relationships.
Yes.
And it's often more powerful to say, here are 2 or 3 or 4 options of partners that might be able to solve your problem. Here's just the high level what their strengths are, and that sells partnerships better than anything else, because you're still letting the credit union make a choice. I'm not choosing. Kris, you're not choosing.
That's right.
They should only use with this solution. And I don't have any. I mean, I have skin in the game in that we help and we're partners on it, but I don't get commissions or others components on their solutions. So it's a good way to be a advocate for everyone, and make sure that the value is being returned.
I think if we in these ecosystems pick winners and losers, then we end up replicating exactly what they're trying to get away from.
Agreed.
Right. So we like to tell customers we will allow no exclusivity in our platform, even for ourselves. We have competing online and mobile banking providers in our development environment, creating content for Constellation. Right. So it is because in the end, what we're driven by is really delivering great services for credit union members. And I know you are too.
Absolutely.
Right. Tell me a little bit about you talked about being up in 30 to 45 days. Walk me through a little bit of what that project process looks like.
Yeah. So whether the conversation starts with the institution or with the software provider or fintech, we come together and say, this is what our overall project looks like. There's some certification we'll do with a software provider so that they know they can talk to the platform, so they can go confidently talk to a credit union and say, hey, yeah, we've worked with a test DNA core. We've worked with a text XP2, with a test correlation, test scimitar, whatever it is. Sometimes they need that, especially if they're starting out as a new solution. But 90+% of what we do for projects include both sides. And because ultimately you don't get to value unless you're actually delivering a connection between the two institutions. And we want providers that are working and partnering with credit unions, not who are trying to go use credit unions, but they're partnering for a joint goal. So in that case, we often start with a fintech or software provider, ensure that their communication, we hand them actual calls most of the time, which is extremely powerful to get us a head start. So of course they have to work on their GUI and front end and the way they make those calls, but they can immediately see how calls are made and how data is returned to them. And they can then go against real test cores in order to make that happen. From that standpoint, once they're basically signed off that this is working, we move right into the test environment of the institution. And while that's going on, we're making the connection to the institution, we're working on their standardizing their side. And so by the time we get to that point, we can start actually doing some real test calls, whatever that would be for their solution, whether it's web calls, phone call, whatever the solution is that's making that. And we go right into effectively an initial UAT testing so that we can move from UAT testing into production. Now, Janusea's involvement at that stage tends to take a much deeper back seat, because the UAT testing is usually what is the member experiencing, what is the employee experiencing, and they go through that. we have a few scenarios where we help partners actually automate the UAT testing, which is powerful to speed that up. It takes a huge load off of the institution. So instead of them doing manual testing, they can actually validate testing that's been done through automation. But that's an add-on service that Janusea has to help out certain partners that want that. But most of the time we let them go through the UAT testing, and then we do the final promotion into production so that they can move ahead. So that window is a little bit squishy as far as timing goes, because it depends on how much UAT testing and what they have to go through. But we support both institutions through that whole process. So if there's some, call, or let's talk about examples. Cores are used in different ways all the time, even when it's the same core, right? So we have a solution provider, and by chance, the first 3 Scimitar customers they work with, they go to add a card, and it's completely different in every scenario. So thankfully, once again, we standardize things. So the call that's being made is always add a card. And that's really handy, and it keeps their development focused on what they're doing. But on the back end with the institution, one, we could write the card to the database. Another one, we had to trigger a power on so that script could go through their custom way of dealing with cards. And another one had to go to a tracking record that they then scraped at the end of the day and dealt with the card. So in just the first 3 scenarios of 3 credit unions working with the same provider, and we go through the implementations, and immediately we see, well, it's a good thing we're standardizing the calls on the back end, because for those 3, we're handling their uniqueness, but the front end knows, and the back end knows how to work with each other. In the middle, we're taking the right call, they're getting the right message back, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to them. We handled a lot of that complexity, but that's a normal process for us. Is when we onboard someone, we got to validate how do some of those unique things they do, or a user-defined field they're using instead of a standard. We capture that up front, make that redirection so that everything can work, not just for that first fintech they're working with, but that then becomes a standard. The next person that needs to order cards, we've already standardized that on that side for them. The next person that needs to talk to that field that, is now redirecting to a user-defined field, because that's where they store things, that's being handled. So that's a little bit of work up front for us, but that's all part of the onboarding.
Yeah. Is there, and this is kind of a crazy question, but have you ever had a core reach out to you and ask how they can be better at making integrations possible? Because it seems to me like it seems like there's a lot of opportunity there, right? Have you ever had a core reach out to you and say, hey, we know you guys represent a large number of institutions who are looking to make connections. Have you ever had one reach out to you and say, how can we make this easier for you?
I don't think that's in their DNA. To reach out.
Was that a pun? About
no.
Oh, okay.
I wasn't talking about a specific one, but that larger company over that one core may be even more challenging. I would say this: it's not that they reach out, but when we engage with them, we found many areas where people have said, this can work well for us. Let me take an example. I don't have the permission to share the core's name. There's 2 smaller, there's 2 cores that tend to work with smaller type institutions, like billion and less. We've had conversations with them because of a need to do an integration. Both of them responded. So they didn't reach out to us, but in the midst of going through that conversation, they said, this is going to be really helpful to our customer base and to our development pipeline. Because that we get requests all the time to do integrations, and we're like, we're going to put you on our 6 or 9 month, schedule. We're going to charge you all this money for this to be done. If we do this one integration and we go ahead and expand the calls beyond just this one thing we're doing, which is always our request, they're like, they could have access to anything that's on your platform or add something to your platform. I said, yeah. And those smaller cores are about serving their members, which is effectively their core CUs. And so they're really excited about that, because now when someone comes and says, can I do this? And if it already is on Janusea platform, they say, we already have that integration done. Go talk to Janusea. They're not quite committed to the full middleware solution, but they see it as a wonderful add-on and partnership for us to work together. And then beyond that, we get really good responses from the regional core servicers. You think of the WRG, SwitchThink, if we just use the correlation ones, for example, right? So they didn't just say, oh yeah, we can help with that. They're like, well, let's go ahead and put you in our meet me room situation, right? Let's do one connection. Let's make it so that anyone who needs a Janusea connection we don't have to go through the whole networking and VPN component. We can do a multi-tenant device and isolate things. And they worked very closely with us on that. That's encouraging. It's exciting because people are thinking broader than just the one connection. Yeah. I would love it if, those core connections were a little more open but they have their way of working. It is really hard for them to deviate from their partner programs and how they function. I just ran into a core that said, we don't store pins. I won't call them out, but they're like, we don't store pin numbers and we don't want to store pin numbers. We're like, you're like the source of record. And so how you're not doing this is just something you decided you're not doing anymore. Like, yeah, we're not doing it anymore. And
interesting.
So we've worked out alternative paths with both sides with the credit union of how this can be handled. But you find some real oddities out there, and you think of the important things that you just take for granted. Like, well, pins can only have so many attempts. It's going to be in an encrypted field, so employees can't see it. I mean, there's certain things you can't do. Like, you can't just throw a pin in a user-defined field, in theory, because an employee could look at it and go home and try to, use it. Sure. So there's different things that we have to work through and help actually architect a solution. Which goes back to a whole beginning part of our conversation. It's not just about, I need to map A on this system to A on this system. Most of the time we start with, what are you trying to accomplish? And if we can make it, if it's A to A, great, let's go through that. But most of the time it's a little more complicated. A lot of our calls will actually pull a group of data, because we know rarely do you just need the name. You probably need a bunch of data around the member, and use that as a bundle, as opposed to just making a single call and then every time have to figure out how to make multiple calls to get this core piece of data that you need for what a member looks like.
Is there you mentioned your canonical model. Is this proprietary to Janusea, or is this a model that has grown out of the work of the industry?
Yes, you are exactly right with that question. It is absolutely, so let me start. It's absolutely grown out of the work of the industry, and we are proud to carry forward the base of CUFX, which has been an initiative, and many people have contributed and put time and resources into that. What was odd through this scenario is that it never was a model that was truly open sourced or contributed. Like, it has a user acceptance agreement and licensing agreement around it. But it's officially a proprietary model that we've continued to commit is going to be there for credit unions to use and work with. Now, Janusea has expanded beyond that and grown that model. And so we've been collaborating with those people that have been involved and stayed involved with CUFX to figure out how can we both hold to that model so it continues to be something credit unions can use in their institutions and work through that standard and know that it's something they can write to and work with the Janusea platform and many other solutions, and yet also find a way for it to be sustainable. One of the challenges with CUFX is that it got to the point where a lot of credit unions were able to contribute, but vendors had backed away. Cores had not fully adopted it. We have more people using a version of CUFX, the superset of CUFX that Janusea's put forth today, than probably ever has been used before. They just don't know it because they're working with Janusea. We've built on that and expanded it. So there's a lot of work there. So I wish I could tell you that has a very clear 5-year roadmap, but it doesn't, because we're still collaborating and working with institutions and credit unions that have been involved to figure out how to work through that. We've even proposed some models, like some tiered models of, here's how you can just participate as a vendor or as a service provider that wants to just support it. Here's how you can go all the way to even having test cores. One of the challenges before is CUFX didn't really have anything it could call to. I mean, CUFX was a standard, but what are you going to do with it if there's nothing on the other end that you can actually test and work with?
Right.
Something that talks to itself, sitting in a room talking to yourself can be kind of boring. I think that's kind of where COFX got to in a lot of cases. So yeah, if you have some vision or insight, I think you guys would be a great partner to continue to help guide and push on the COFX standard in the open space. And then there's obviously places with our partnership that I think in the more closed proprietary space, there's influence there too.
Yeah, no, you'll find us ready to participate in that. In fact, we actually just had the conversation the other day. So I'm excited about that. If folks wanted to learn more about Janusea, Kyle, how do they reach out to you? How do they get in touch with you?
Yeah. I mean, janusea.com, JANUSEA is the nice way to go. And we have, or info@Janusea is a good way to reach out. Masako is active, and if you haven't been on LinkedIn and see all her collages and all the pictures she takes at conferences, she's a great lead for us on the sales and partnership side. We're very responsive, so reach out to any of us if you need to connect. We'd love to have that conversation. That's catch us at a conference, catch us at Nacuso, catch us wherever. Yeah.
Yeah, or it's likely to talk to one of the fintechs, and the fintechs will probably bring you around too, right? That's the whole idea.
It is. We have a lot of credit unions, a lot of fintechs that are pushing that forward. Yeah. Appreciate it.
Very good. Well, Kyle, I really appreciate you joining us today. It was a great discussion, and I hope credit unions really embrace this vision for how to make themselves more agile, how to connect to their members more quickly, because it's so very important to help us maintain relevance for the young people and the digital services and other kinds of integrated services that we provide. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Kris. It's been a pleasure. Always good to catch up.
This podcast is sponsored by Constellation. We're empowering community financial institutions with innovative digital solutions, powered by Fintech, driven by your roadmap. Join us as we navigate the future of digital banking together. For more information on how we can be your partner for digital transformation, visit www.constellation.coop.
Thank you, Kyle, for an amazing episode. In fact, after the recording, we hung around and kept talking for a little while, so be sure to check out that additional content as part of our audio channels and on our LinkedIn page. Please like and follow on your platform of choice. Thank you for watching. We will see you next time.